Hi everyone, this is Isabel. Because of my last video and because I love crafting, I decided to make a how-to create a junk journal from beginning to end. I love seeing completed journals because I always wonder what people do with them, but I'm always left wondering how did they do that. So I'm going to be making a how-to on a journal that I showed before, my 2016 travel journal. It won't be completely the same, but it will be the same type of journal. So let's begin the first part of making a junk journal out of a recycled book. I have a box full of old books that I have found at flea markets or discarded at school. When looking for a book, I make sure it's sturdy and strong. I really don't worry about the size, but for the most part, the books that I pick up are smaller than 9 inches in height. I usually make my journals super chunky, so I look at the size of the spine also, but really it doesn't matter. I make them all sizes. Once I decide on a book to work with, I cut out the pages. I use a craft knife and carefully cut everything off, making sure not to cut into the spine of the book. I also try not to cut myself because craft knives are very sharp. The book is not going to look very neat, but don't worry, we will be covering it up. I keep the block for other projects, so don't throw it away. So now let's cover up this book and make it pretty. You'll need glue or any type of adhesive of your choice, a brush or whatever you apply your adhesive with, and some scissors. You'll need paper for the cover. I'm using wrapping paper. You can use any type of paper. I only bought this one because of the puggy on the paper. When I cut the paper, I just eyeball it. I don't really take measurements. You just need to make sure the paper will cover the book. It does not have to be precise or pretty as you'll see on mine. I hate doing anything that involves math, so measuring is not my thing. Now that I have cut it, I am going to ball it up. I know it's hard to see this because the paper was so pretty. I'll tell you why I do this. One, it will hide any imperfections once it's glued, and the other reason is I just like the way it looks. So wrinkle it or don't wrinkle it. It's yours. Make it how you like. Before I glue the paper, I use Tyvek on my spine to reinforce it. You don't really need to use it, but the spine is going to have weight because of the thread and signatures. This helps it keep its shape and strength. Like I said, I don't measure, so I just cut double of what the spine is. I glue the Tyvek to the spine. Make sure to use a lot to cover the whole paper. I press the paper firmly and move the book around to make sure the book can still move back and forth. I'm not worried about the overlap of the Tyvek at the top. It will get glued down when I put the wrapping paper. Now it's time for the doggy paper. Use a lot of glue for this. You want the paper to completely lay flat without any air bubbles. This is when the wrinkles help out. Because I'm using wet glue, the paper tends to wrinkle. In this case, it doesn't matter because the paper is already wrinkled. You see, what did I tell you? Ball that paper up. I usually glue one side of the book and make sure I'm pressing the paper down. Make sure the paper is sticking to the joints of the book. I then glue the other side down. Just make sure the paper is completely laying flat and sticking to the glue. It's looking like a book now. Now we're going to be gluing the overlap of the wrapping paper. I start with the corners and I glue them first. Remember, the corners will be tucked in the middle of the end paper, so just make sure they are glued down. I don't really worry about how much glue I use for this part. I then start gluing the sides. Here I do make sure I use enough glue for all the paper to lay flat. You don't want it lifting up once the journal is completed. I press and repress to make sure the paper is adhered completely. You'll notice I'm using a popsicle stick to help with folding it down straight. Obviously, you can use a bone folder or a credit card, but press the paper down. Just be careful because since the paper is wet with glue, it can tear easily. While I'm waiting for the paper to dry, I'm going to start deciding on the end paper. When deciding on this, I just make sure that it complements my cover paper. At this point, I don't even know what the journal will be used for. I'm just going to choose pretty paper. I will be choosing 2 colors, one for the sides and one for the spine. It could be the same really, it's up to you. I just play with the measurements and then cut to the size I want. I end up cutting the end papers 5 by 8 inches and the spine paper 4 by 8. Once the cover has dried, I apply Mod Podge to seal it. Junk journals are not really treated with kid gloves. They're thrown in bags and take a lot of wear and tear. I know some people don't like using Mod Podge, but I use it just to protect the covers. I apply it all over the front, making sure it's all over. Once the cover is dry, I also apply it on the inside of the cover, just not on the end paper. This is the messiest part of making the journal. Once the cover is dry, I glue the spine cover and the end papers. Just make sure that you're bending the book back and forth to make sure everything is glued down. Press and press and press some more with your hands or popsicle stick. You're also bending the book to take any stiffness out of it. I don't seal my end papers with Mod Podge. You could if you wanted to, but I would be careful that later on the pages might want to stick to the book if it's not completely dry. I'm impatient, so I know this would happen to me. That's it for this part of the journal making. Every part of making a journal has its own creative outlet, from choosing the book and finding the perfect papers. It's all about how you're feeling at that precise moment. As I've always said, I have no creativity in me, but making journals makes me feel a little creative. That's why these junk journals are so popular. No junk journal is ever the same. Come back next week and I will continue with the binding process. I will be using the saddle stitch binding for the spine. I hope you learned something new with this video. My way is probably similar to how others make it, but it may also be different. There is no right or wrong way. This is what sets us all apart. I love looking at how people make theirs because I know I will find something that I can use in my own journals. The beautiful part of making your own journals is the time spent in your own brain. I get lost when I'm making these journals. My thoughts are only on my journal. No better therapy than crafting. So, what are you waiting for? Hurry up and find yourself an old discarded hardcover book. Cut out the text block and find yourself some pretty paper and create your junk journal cover. Then come back and visit for the next video. Bye!